They make their teammates scramble for dear life, and their coaches pull their hair in despair. Here are the worst defenders in the NBA right now. Russell Westbrook. If we had to describe Westbrook's defense with 2 words, those words would be fake hustle. If you watch him play for 2 or 3 possessions, it may seem like he's trying hard on defense. But if you watch an entire quarter or a whole game, it's obvious that he's a defensive disaster. Westbrook is criticized so much for being an inefficient shooter and poor decision maker offensively, but it's his sins on defense that deserve a first-class ticket to basketball hell. Why? Because it's okay to miss a shot and make a turnover, but some of his defensive woes are just due to a complete lack of focus or effort. Westbrook will often just stand on the court and watch a play develop without a single care in the world, completely neglecting his defensive assignments. After a turnover, Russ jogs back to defense instead of running back and gets killed on screens and doesn't fight back to cover the opposing guard, which leaves the defense scrambling and covering for his mistakes. And then there are the fake hustle plays that make every Laker fan sick to their stomach. Russ will leave a player wide open and then he'll jump in his general direction with his hands up, even though he's more than 6 feet away and there is no chance in hell that he blocks the shot. Under coach Frank Vogel, the Lakers finished 3rd in defensive rating in 2020, and they had the best defense in the NBA in 2021. In 2022, they stupidly traded away Alex Caruso, who was one of the best perimeter defenders in the game, to make room for Russ. The result was that they ranked only 21st in defensive rating with the same coach. To be fair, it's partly because of injuries to LeBron and Anthony Davis and signing old geezers who can't defend. DeAndre Jordan is a walking corpse, a shell of his former self, and he really shouldn't be playing NBA basketball anymore. Carmelo Anthony is still really fun to watch on offense, but for every bucket he makes, he immediately gives up one on the other end. Melo was never a great defender, and now that he's older, he can't guard a chair. But still, the point guard is the first line of defense, and the Lakers got themselves one of the most overrated, most overpaid, and most lackadaisical defensive point guards in the world. When they had Caruso, they had real hustle. Replacing it with fake hustle was one of the worst decisions in recent franchise history. Trey Young. When he first came to the NBA, the biggest question mark around Trey Young was his size and his defensive output. After we've seen him play for 4 years, that's still the biggest Achilles heel of his game. Trey can light it up from deep. His floaters are arguably the best in the NBA right now, and he's a magician in the pick and roll. But Trey is still a small, skinny point guard with bad defensive habits. Young will never get taller, but he has to get to a point where he gives consistent effort and not compromise his team by not following defensive assignments, not rotating, or being out of position. Too often, his defensive effort is non-existent. Atlanta's defensive rating is 105.7 when he is off the floor, but 114.7 when he's on it. Of course, Young was not the only issue for the Hawks. Danilo Gallinari is far from a defensive stopper, and the same goes for Lou Williams and to a lesser extent John Collins. With DeJounte Murray on board for 2023, the Hawks should improve by default, but we still want to see more hustle from Trey. Domantas Sabonis. Domantas Sabonis has many great qualities. He's a great rebounder, post scorer, and passer, and is extremely efficient. He is a 2-time All-Star due to his offensive production, but that doesn't mask the fact that he's one of the worst rim protectors in the NBA. Verticality and quick feet are not in Sabonis' dictionary, and he couldn't guard the basket if his life depended on it. Domas is a center that averages just 0.4 blocks per game. When he was with the Pacers, Indiana allowed 107 points per 100 possessions, an equivalent to a top 10 defense, but that was mostly because of Miles Turner, arguably the best shot blocker in the game. With Sabonis on the floor, without Turner, the floodgates opened, and the Pacers allowed 113 points per 100 possessions, equivalent to the 4th worst defense in the league. While Sabonis is sturdy and is great at defending the post against bulky centers, rim protection and the ability to switch and pick and roll are the most important defensive attributes in modern basketball, and those are the areas where he doesn't rank high. Other than Sabonis, there are plenty of other centers who are not good at defending the rim. Jonas Valanciunas is one to be mentioned here, as well as Enes Kanter, Cody Zeller, Tristan Thompson, and 2 Nicolas, Jokic, and Vucevic. Jordan Clarkson. Rudy Gobert is the best defensive center in the last 10 years with 3 Defensive Player of the Year awards to show for it. Rudy's nickname is the Stifle Tower due to his unique ability to stay glued both to the roller and the ball handler in the pick and roll, with his insane length and unbelievable mobility in a 7'2" frame. However, the Jazz had such a horrible perimeter defense that it even made Rudy Gobert look stupid and left people questioning his defensive brilliance. This is extremely unfair to Gobert because Utah was leaking like a Titanic after the iceberg hit, and Rudy couldn't do anything to make them stay afloat. Jazz's guards and wings couldn't guard anybody one-on-one, and opposing players would often get past them like they were high school kids. Mike Conley, Jordan Clarkson, Donovan Mitchell, and to an extent Bojan Bogdanovic were all to blame for Utah's defensive nightmares. A simple ball swing, screen, or crossover would completely discombobulate Utah's defense, which would leave Gobert to choose whether to give up an open dunk or an open three-pointer. Rudy naturally chose to close out the paint and prevent the dunk, and that resulted in Mavericks making 17 uncontested threes in Game 2 of the playoffs, which was an NBA record. Then, without Gobert in the lineup, Utah's defense went from mediocre to historically terrible. We chose Clarkson as the main guy to blame, but it could have easily been Donovan Mitchell as well. Spider is a superstar and has all the physical tools to be at least a good defender, and he really underperforms on that end of the floor. Jalen Green. Jalen Green is one of the brightest young prospects in the NBA. He was the second pick in the 2021 NBA draft, and he averaged 17 points per game as a rookie, which is nothing to be mad about. With electrifying athleticism and one of the quickest first steps in the NBA, Green can get past almost any defender and has proven to be a decent shooter as well. However, Jalen has a bit of tunnel vision when he gets the ball and is far from a good passer. But if his scoring is the good and his passing is the bad, his defense is definitely the ugly. Green is thin and is easily outmuscled by every wing and most guards. His court awareness, understanding, and execution of defensive assignments are catastrophic, and he often looks lost on that end of the court. In 2022, Houston's rookie had the worst defensive rating in the entire league, and it was the second worst since the 2022 NBA merger for players logging more than 2,000 minutes. Opponents made 54% of their shots when guarded by Jalen, 8% more than their average, which was again the worst mark in the NBA. But we understand that he is a rookie and that he played on a young Rockets team that was tanking with the second worst defensive rating in 2022. Green is extremely talented. He will bulk up and gain experience. Because he and the Rockets were so terrible defensively, there is nowhere to go but up. Kemba Walker. Kemba Walker was not a good defender in his prime. He's only 6 feet tall, and at 180 pounds, he could never really contain anybody. Now, after multiple knee injuries and decreased mobility, he's nearly unplayable because of his horrendous defense. Kemba is only 32 years old and was an all-star in 2020, but in 2022, he was benched by the Knicks. We'll repeat that, by the Knicks, who are not a synonym for winning. Walker will spend the last year of his contract in Detroit, and we're afraid that he'll suffer the same fate as Isaiah Thomas. IT is another small guard who lost his place in the NBA after injuries took away his mobility and further exposed his deficiencies on defense. Other small guards who can be mentioned as defensive liabilities are DJ Augustine, Patty Mills, Bryn Forbes, and Seth Curry. Anthony Simons. According to almost all advanced defensive stats, such as the defensive box plus-minus, regularized adjusted plus-minus, or Raptor, in 2022, Anthony Simons was the worst defensive player in the NBA. He ranks at the bottom of the league in all these metrics, and the eye test confirms it. Simons is on the smaller side of NBA point guards, with a slender frame that doesn't provide much resistance to dribble penetration. Portland's coaches usually hide him on defense by putting him to guard the corner three, but even then, Simons is often just watching the action and isn't glued to his man. Still, the young guard had an offensive explosion last season, and the Blazers offered him a $100 million extension. That means most backcourt minutes in 2023 will be shared by Anthony and Damian Lillard, who was never a good defensive player. But the Blazers realized this too, so they brought in athletic wings like Gary Payton and Jeremy Grant. In 2022, Portland had the worst defense in the NBA, and their biggest improvement has to come on that end of the floor, starting with more effort from Simons and Lillard. Davis Bertans. Since he came to the league in 2016, Davis Bertans has been one of the best shooting big men in the NBA. Shooting is what kept him on the floor and secured him a nice contract with the Wizards, but he's definitely a liability on the other end of the floor. Bertans is tall, but he's not particularly strong and can be easily bullied by stronger players. Latvian shooter has very poor reaction times and often loses track of the guy he's supposed to defend. Davis's feet are slow and his closeouts are atrocious, which leaves players open for three, and fans wondering why is he earning $16 million per season. Thomas Bryant. At 6'10" and 250 pounds with a 7'5" wingspan, Thomas Bryant has the perfect size and length for a modern big man, but his presence as a rim protector, rebounder, and interior anchor is rarely felt. The new Lakers center is what is known as an offensive center. He's capable of producing buckets, and his 60% shooting from the field makes him a solid pickup in fantasy basketball. But in real life, he's a black hole defensively, struggling to guard the rim, playing help D, boxing out, or containing pick and roll. After he tore his ACL in January January 2021, the Wizards center played just 27 games in the 2022 season, and his defense has dipped even more. The Lakers signed him to provide an offensive punch off the bench. But even though they have a Bryant on the team, Thomas is not Kobe. And Lakers fans shouldn't get their hopes up. Buddy Hield. Buddy Hield has the worst defensive rating in NBA history. However, defensive rating as a metric is not the best indicator of defensive prowess because it heavily depends on the teammates that share the court with you. If prime Michael Jordan played NBA basketball with Kevin Hart and Tom Cruise as his teammates, guess what? Their team would concede a lot of points, and MJ would have a bad defensive rating because he shared his minutes with 5-foot-tall actors. NBA offenses are at an all-time high in efficiency. Offensive players are more protected than ever, and it's really hard to play good defense, but it's even harder to measure it on an individual level. In 2018, ESPN's Real Plus Minus ranked Brook Lopez as the worst defensive center in the league. 2 seasons later, playing for a new team with a new coach and different defensive scheme, Lopez ranked 3rd in the NBA by the same metric. He was also named to an all-defensive team and helped the Bucks post one of the stingiest defensive marks in league history. Basketball is a team game, and good defense is dependent on teammates, matchups, understanding coverages, and communication. So the dirty secret is that no statistic can properly measure good defense. Take Dennis Rodman, who was one of the best defenders in NBA history, a guy who was a maniac in disrupting offenses, who fought for position with teeth and nails, and who stopped dribble penetration better than anyone in his prime. That Dennis Rodman averages less than 1 steal and 1 block per game. Allen Iverson led the league in steals 3 times, but it's because he gambled and hunted down steals by jumping into passing lanes. When he was successful, it was great, but more often than not, Iverson's gamble would not pay off and would leave a giant hole in the defense that usually led to an easy bucket. Both traditional and advanced stats can give us insight into a defensive output, but certainly shouldn't be taken as 100% correct tools. So, now that we established that it's hard to measure defensive impact, let's get back to Buddy Hield, who is not the worst defender in NBA history. Buddy is not a great defensive stopper by any means. Let's get that out of the way. While he is decent at defending the three-point line, Hield routinely allows his man to get past him on the perimeter for a straight line to the basket and easy points. However, it's hard to say, measure, or quantify that Buddy or anyone else is the worst defensive player ever, but we feel that this list is pretty objective and filled with players that make defenses leak. Let us know if you agree.